This is a video that I was thinking for a very long time, whether I want to make and how to approach its sensitive subject matter, and also whether or not it was worth it to give it even more attention. For those who have been following my channel, this is not the very first time that I'm talking about this album. I have included it in my list with my favorite albums of the past decade and also in my most popular video, The Noise Iceberg. It is one of those albums that have been the subject of discussion for its subject matter and most importantly, the way it handles it. This has as a result being regarded as one of the most disturbing pieces of music to be ever recorded, and I have to agree as I believe that this is one of the few albums that I would consider legitimately disturbing and messed up in regards to the effect of being able to put this state of uneasiness and discomfort. This is one of the most essential albums I can recommend to you. And yet, usually when it comes to disturbing pieces of media, you have a line in your mind that should not be crossed. So, what if this album is the pinnacle of disturbing recordings, but achieves that by crossing that line? This question of moral values and ethics is what I'm planning to touch upon in this video, and while there have been people talking about the sinister nature of this album, what about having this perspective from someone like me who actually owns this on CD? Keep in mind before you proceed that this video covers topics of death, loss, and is gonna be very descriptive, so trigger warning because this is not for the faint of heart. This right here is How Welcome is Death to I Who Have Nothing More to Do But Die by Condom, that stands for Control-Domination. This is actually one of the first power electronics albums I discovered and got in my collection. Looking back to it, this is not an album that I can easily come back to because of how disturbing it is, but things were not the same back then. There was a time in my life where I was an edgelord. I still am, but let's say I've matured enough to know how to handle certain themes and situations a little bit better. In terms of guilty pleasures, I don't have any. It's not a thing for me. I don't regret about stuff I discovered and bought in the past. My urge and intrigue to look up to the most messed up side of the internet got me into many different rabbit holes, including my purchase of this album. So this to me basically reflects that point in time. I look back to this album and any other album that I have in my collection, and I see myself through them, my beliefs, my values, my stances at the time. It is the main thing that refreshes my memory when it comes to how I was in the past, what situations I've been through, and for those reasons, I don't regret buying this album. It is a reminder of how I was and how I've seen myself mature and progress through life. It is another part of my life, and it tells a story. So what is it that makes this particular release so hard to sit through, and what is the line that it crosses? First of all, let's look at the main figure behind the project, Mike Dando, who has been probably one of the more controversial people in the power electronics scene. In my previous video talking about Genocide Organ, I started by questioning their moral values and politics for being an overtly political project while simultaneously being really vague about their own identity. And the main reason these concerns rise is because of the label that they have, TESCO organization, containing multiple works of Condom, including the one I'm talking about in this video. The thing is, Mike Dando is also a person that is really vague about their political beliefs and how their themes and imagery get easily misinterpreted, but unlike Genocide Organ, Condom has been even more upfront on showcasing extremities such as displays of swastikas, and also albums such as Color of a Man's Skin that is about racial hatred and violence, with the black LP being about black to white violence and the white LP being about white to black violence, in which you also get the usage of the N-word with a hard R a lot. The thing is that this is possibly one of the most effective power electronics albums on evoking this feeling of hatred, frustration and anger, but because of its themes and how it tackles them, it's really hard to recommend. But the final work of Condom from back in 2016 is a very different one and also a deeply personal one. So themes like aging, the loss of a loved one, and having to take care of a severely ill old person are themes that not only a lot of you can possibly relate, but can also make for some of the most heart-wrenching pieces of media ever created. Dedicating an album to a loved one who passed away is something that we've seen happening lots of times, and the sentimentality of those albums, depictions of good and bad memories, have a really strong effect on evoking some really powerful emotions. Two really strong examples of this that I can think of are the albums Carrie and Lowell by Sufjan Stevens and A Crow Looked at Me by Mount Eerie, who can in their own respective ways be deemed as disturbing for being way too descriptive about themes lots of people get sensitive about. Condom takes this approach of dedicating a whole album to a loved one and being so unapologetically raw, visceral, devastating, horrifically descriptive, to a point that I haven't seen been done before, and in a sense, it's probably for the better. Mike Dando dedicates this album to his mother during the painful final moments of her life up until her death, who was diagnosed with PSP, which is short for progressive supranuclear palsy, a neurological degenerative disease for which there is no treatment or cure. During this time, Condom gets overly descriptive about the heavily vulnerable situation his mother is in, slowly decaying, being unable to speak or form sentences, struggling to eat, having to be carried by nurses in order to go to the toilet or have a bath once a week, being unable to wipe herself, pissing and shitting herself in her diapers. All of these things get excruciatingly described with shocking amounts of detail that showcase taking care of the elderly through their final moments under extremely tough circumstances. The issue that comes with the handling of those things does not really have to do with the shocking details. There's more to it. If you can already tell, the album cover right here is a photo of his mother at her final moments. The album layout is filled with so many of these photos of his mother slowly decaying and capturing those heavily vulnerable moments on camera. Really hard to watch. On top of that, there are a few interludes in this album that are actually recordings of his mother making weird noises and screaming. I don't think I have to preface this, but you do realize how fucked up this is, right? This is absolutely sickening. Like, imagine having a person that you love and is going through a lot of struggle, and you want to dedicate a song about them, let alone a whole album. At which point would you deem this as something acceptable to do? Because I don't think she consented to those photos being taken. I don't think she consented to her being recorded in a vulnerable state and being put in an album. Is this really a dedication to a loved one? Because this doesn't seem like something you would do to someone you love, violating their privacy, recording them and taking photos of them in a heavily vulnerable state, and then displaying them to the public. This is where the question of morality comes from, and where the line between acceptable and not acceptable becomes iffy. Maybe Mike hated his mother, because this doesn't feel like something you would do when you love someone. Maybe she was a horrible person, but this doesn't feel like an appropriate thing to do regardless. So what we have over here is one of the rawest and most unfiltered depictions of death and mortality ever being put in an art form. But at what cost? Do we really deserve to witness, as listeners and viewers, such a devastating portrayal of a slow and painful death in a piece of media? To partake in such a bleak experience at the expense of a possible violation of someone's privacy during their final moments of their lives? Those are the questions I end up raising the more I think about this album, the more I reflect back on the time when I made the decision to buy this CD. And by the way, it's not like I've ever been the type of person to see gore videos just for fun, to listen to this just for fun. I know these types of people. Even back then, I would think of it as a harrowing and depressing album. It's just that certain ways of viewing and approaching things have changed over time. I hope you get what I'm saying. So the themes are gut-wrenching and the approach is definitely questionable. So what about the actual music on this project? Well, honestly, I think that this is one of the greatest death industrial and power electronics albums of the past decade. It perfectly encapsulates the sheer horror with dynamic feedback, bleak atmosphere, haunting dark ambience, and some incredible spoken word techniques. Right off the bat, the 13-minute track Living Death is downright disturbing. The layers of noise and feedback constantly progress, ramp up, and leave you no room to breathe. The vocals are extremely creative on this one, being played twice with different tone shades and a long gap between them, sort of like a delay technique. And in this one we get some of the most shocking descriptive scenes of the whole project, with its themes being mentioned beforehand. Condom uses first person as if these are words his mother is saying, which alongside her struggle to do casual everyday activities also give the impression that his mother did not have the will to live like this, that she's giving up on life, something that is also being brought up in other tracks in the album. After another short interlude, the self-titled track is a pretty straightforward power electronics track that is filled with low frequency distortion, and after a few haunting background vocals that are very serviceable for the genre, the second half adds numerous free improvised industrial elements to make the overall experience more chaotic and visceral. With the next interlude, Sarah 1 is where we get the really disturbing recordings that showcase the slower decay of his mother. This one in particular is really hard to sit through. Transitioning to Chocolates is another 13-minute cut that contains a very powerful noisy loop. Towards the 3rd-minute mark there are sounds like choking, having trouble to swallow, and shortly after the vocals come into place, which are spoken word with a very deep voice, like pitched down, and almost no other effect to them, they are just upfront. In this track there is the mention of the diagnosis, a similar condition that led to the death of her partner, and her desire to kill herself and end her life, as she's tired of living like this and being dependent on others. The 6-second interlude scream is enough to be one of the most bone-chilling moments in this whole experience, and then we transition to T4. This one goes more into the death industrial territory. It doesn't have the same amount of intensity, though there are glimpses of noise feedback becoming a bit loud and then fading back out. The vocals in this one are pretty hard to decipher, but it seems that it's spoken word of this letter right here. It says that it dates back in 1939. It is about a person requesting a petition for the mercy killing of his mother, who is incredibly sick and has become a burden to anyone trying to take care of her when there is no point anymore. The vocals then transition to German, possibly reading the same letter in a different language, but I can't tell for sure. Even with this letter not being related to this particular story, it reads like something that Mike has thought of. Just Fucking Die returns to the more gritty and more intense sounding moments of the project. Another intense low-frequency feedback loop with other background sounds that emit a more chaotic feel, with another long track going for 10 minutes and being relentless from start to finish. Outside of the letter from T4, this is the very first time where first person is not used as if these are words of his mother. This is the first moment where we hear Mike Dando's emotional state and thoughts. It sounds really hateful and repulsive, a situation that he doesn't want to be in. It's like a ton of repressed emotions with the harshest vocal delivery of this whole album, coming the closest to the pure raw formula that you would get from a power electronics project. The final main moment of this album is the 9-minute ending Nora, a devastating dark ambient piece that ends things off with some sort of relief that this whole thing is finally over. It is the perfect tone to end an album filled with intensity with a more calming moment of peace that comes with death. After all the pain, agony, the album leaves its final remark with a devastating dark ambient piece alongside a few subtle recordings being placed, and the final interlude is just the TV playing in the background. What a heavy album. This is without a question one of the greatest pieces of music that have disturbed me and shook me to the core. But the question comes, was it worth it? Taking such extreme measures at the pursuit of extreme art to create such raw and unsettling emotions to the point where you just create this. Something that you can perceive as insane dedication or a disgrace. You don't easily get albums like this. This is very, very special. And this is the main case of an album that I consider essential, but I can't really recommend to you. If you still wish to proceed, do so with caution, because you're in for a heavy ride. Let me know your thoughts of this album down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.